Hello everybody, welcome to the Boxing Science Podcast. This is episode 74, where I'm going to be answering your questions about a range of different subjects regarding sports science in boxing and combat sports. In this week's episode, we've got a range of different subjects, including recovery methods for amateur boxing, how to implement high-intensity conditioning into your training week, and also a really interesting question about what is the biggest change that I've seen from my experience of over 12 years of working in boxing. If you're not a subscriber to our Boxing Science YouTube channel yet, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future content, and also support the growth of the channel so we can keep providing these Q&A sessions for you. Okay guys, let's get on with this week's episode. Okay, the first question is about recovery methods for amateur boxing. What are the best methods, even though you've got limited equipment? So recovery methods for amateur and professional boxing can be made very simple and basic to manage. I see a lot of things on social media, a lot of recovery methods, such as ice baths, cryotherapy, compression garments and compression boots, hyperbaric chambers. A lot of boxers are trying to find the recovery methods to gain them extra percentages during training camp. But what I like to implement, and this is something that we share on our workshops, is a recovery matrix, a recovery pyramid, where we've got a level 1, 2, and 3, where we're looking at the basics first. If you're not getting the basics right in terms of managing training load, nutrition, and sleep, there's not really much point in doing the things that are really at the top of the ladder, which is stuff like your ice baths and your cryotherapy. Even though it's like amateur boxing and you feel like you've got limited equipment, there's some basic things that you can do. Managing training load, monitoring training load as well. Making sure you have a really refined plan for your training week to make sure that you're having some heavy days followed by some lighter days, and then putting that into a full training program where we're having a 3-to-1 loading to deload ratio, where we're progressively pushing our body and having a week deloading to help that body recover as well. You need to make sure that you're doing your nutrition, make sure that you're fueling performance and also fueling your recovery, whether that's in a short window following your boxing and your training sessions, whether that's a recovery snack or shake, or making sure that you're rehydrated, but then making sure that your nutrient timing is correct to be able to fuel that recovery even further. And then monitoring sleep. We've got these things now on our wrists. We've got Apple Watches, we've got Whoop bands, Garmin's that can be tracking your sleep overnight and making sure that you've got good sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene being making sure that you're in a dark room for 1 to 2 hours before you actually schedule to sleep, making sure that you're off your phone and limiting that screen time. That screen time not just on your phone, but laptops and TVs as well. Just making sure that you're managing things around your sleep, not just about getting 8 hours, but the quality of sleep as well. Some very basic and maybe quite boring tools to help boost your recovery, but like I said, they're the main foundations of improving recovery for boxing. From that, you can start implementing some training, maybe some mobility training, doing some cool downs, or maybe doing a structured session around doing mobility training. Active recovery sessions as well. So doing some treadmill runs or some off-feet conditioning, but targeting lower intensity, higher volume work, targeting that green zone, zone 2, zone 3 on your heart rate monitors. And this is designed to keep burning energy, keep burning the calories, but doing it at a lower intensity will help reduce training monotony across your training week. This variation of loads between heavy sessions to light sessions will help reduce that training monotony, which will help reduce fatigue and boost recovery as well. So let's say that you're doing all of these things quite well and you're wanting some recovery tools. I feel that heat is the main thing that we can do using the sauna, if you've got access to this. If you haven't got access to this, doing a hot bath between 20 and 30 minutes, I'd suggest a temperature around about 40 to 42 degrees Celsius, and to make sure that you're hydrated throughout this process. Make sure that you're keeping a log of the ear thermometer temperature, and this can't surpass 39 degrees Celsius. Just make sure that you're doing this with somebody present, so just make sure that this is done safely and effectively. But this isn't to make weight, but is used to get some heat acclimation work, and this will help boost recovery as well. We can also do contrast bathing and contrast therapy. We do this at Boxing Science, where we flip between the sauna and the ice bath, we do cycles of either 5 minutes heat, 1 minute cool, or we can do shorter windows between 3 minutes heat and 30 seconds cool. We can replicate this in the shower, just turning hot and cold. And you'd be doing this for 3 minutes on hot, 1 minute on cold. And you'd be doing between 4 and 5 cycles of this. I think out of all of them, different options, I think the easiest ones to do is to do the contrast between hot and cold. In the shower, you can do this between 2 and 3 times a week and see how this boosts your recovery. But that is probably the most simplest and most cost-effective tool. Like I said, recovery doesn't need to be high-tech or expensive, because these are the ones that add them extra percentages right at the top level. If you're not doing the basics right, then they're not going to be as effective. So get the basics right in terms of your sleep, your training load, your nutrition. Start managing your active recovery, mobility, routines and everything like that. And then start implementing some sauna work and some contrast work before you start looking at these high-tech options. Okay, so this is a really interesting question. As you continue to train boxers, what's something that you've changed your mind on? And especially recently, since I'm sure you've changed your mind on plenty of things over the course of your career. Interesting question this. When I was first starting in boxing, I was not only inexperienced in boxing, but also inexperienced in strength and conditioning. So I probably went more textbook approach when first starting boxing, and then moving towards more experience and trying to get the best out of boxers and combat athletes as they prepare for competition. Potentially it's the use of Olympic lifting. I come from a background in terms of like university, UKSA route, Olympic lifting being the gold standard way to develop athletes, strength, speed and power. But actually working with boxers is quite difficult to implement Olympic lifting because of the short training camps where we're needing to optimize that strength and speed and power going into each fight in very short windows. They have a lot of mobility issues. If it's not overhead mobility and stability, it's also imbalances between each side, whether it's imbalances in strength and stability of each shoulder or of the lower body. This makes the technique and the loading strategies quite difficult to implement. So when I first started out, I was big on trying to develop boxers in a way to start implementing Olympic lifting. And then now I'm looking for the quick and easy wins to start overloading athletes to help improve their strength, speed and power characteristics. I'd swap Olympic lifting out for heavy deadlifts, trap bar deadlifts from blocks, also doing partial range exercises on the squatting exercises as well, but then have that transfer to strength, speed and power exercises, looking to accommodate in resistance or doing some trap bar jumps, and make sure these trap bar jumps are done heavy and they're monitored in terms of their jump height or the lifting velocity to make sure that we're optimizing momentum. Even though there's a technique to this, it's less technical demands on doing the loaded jumps than would be doing the Olympic lifting. Another thing that I've changed my mind on, this isn't too recent, the use of running for conditioning. When we first started out, the university, all of our conditioning sessions were done either on the motorized treadmill or on the non-motorized treadmill, or a lot of people will know this as the curve. And we've got fighters pretty fit on this. There was a limited, in terms of the intensities that they could reach and hold, especially during our repeated sprint or our sprint interval training sessions. And also this had a big impact on their training elsewhere because of the increased force and impact loads going through the lower body. Now that we've moved to the Boxing Science Performance Centre and we have access to an assault bike, we much prefer doing the assault bike for the high intensity conditioning. We do mix it up between using the curve and also using the motorized treadmill, but for repeated sprint protocols and also our sprint interval training, we prioritize the assault bike over running base conditioning. And the reason why, we've reduced and totally taken away them impact forces going through the lower body. We're also being able to reach increased intensities because there's a lower technical demand on doing the assault bike compared to high speed running. So we're able to then reach increase intensities, but then also being able to hold it, especially on the 30-second sprints. When we're doing the 30-second sprints before, pushing our athletes to the extreme levels of fatigue, by the third or fourth rep, the peak speed was reduced, and also the maintenance of speed was reduced as well. And this affected the quality of the session and the adaptations that we're targeting. By saying lactate analyzer, looking at lactates of 19 or 20 millimole per litre being some of the highest values that we got. When we're doing the 30-second sprints on the assault bike, we see 20 millimole quite often and beyond. We see most athletes hitting 23, 24, 25 millimole per litre. And this is just showing that we're depleting that muscle cell further to then increase the adaptation that we're targeting during them 30-second sprints. So we've found a safer way to perform the 30-second sprints by doing the assault bike compared to the curve, but also it's more effective because we're showing that we're maintaining that intensity for longer, we're depleting that muscle cell even further, and then we're going to be stimulating the adaptations that we're trying to target during the 30-second max out sprints. And the third thing would be, for me, how crucial making weight safely and effectively is. When I first started working in boxing, I was working with amateurs, low-level professionals, youth athletes that weren't making weight or struggling to make the weight as such. Amateurs are quite close to the weight. When you're working with low-level professionals or up-and-coming professionals, they're not making championship weight. As soon as I started working with athletes making championship weight, I realized the dangers of making weight and also how that can undo the progress that you make throughout a training camp. Instead of finding that out in the short term, let's say a few weeks before a fight or just a few hours before weighing, it's really important to have the knowledge and understanding on how difficult that this weight cut could be. We can find this out with 8, 10, even 12 weeks before an athlete is fighting. The main reasons why we know this is because we have performance nutritionist Lee Rickards. Go and follow him on Instagram at boxingscience_nutrition. And he performs the body composition analysis where we're finding out body fat, lean mass, fat-free mass. This data is really important to find out how tight an athlete is at the weight, what weight that they should fight at, how hard that it could be, or how easy that it could be. And then the second test that we do is really important is our resting metabolic rate assessment. And this is probably the easiest test that we do at Boxing Science. It's actually the hardest thing to do is to keep awake. This is assessing how many calories that you burn during resting. And from this, we can create some calculations based on your training loads, your training schedule, on how many calories that you're likely to burn each day. And then a detailed nutrition plan can help you fuel each day adequately whilst also making weight safely. Using the body composition, using the resting metabolic rate can then inform us how hard will it be for this athlete to make weight. Do they need to make adjustments in terms of what weight category that they're in? Or if they're going to stick at that weight category, what adjustments do we need to make to their training? Do we need to go for a higher volume, high intensity conditioning approach? Do we need to focus on central adaptations rather than repeat sprint conditioning because we're needing to increase that energy expenditure? Is there any room to increase muscle mass? Or is there an athlete that tight at the weight that we need to avoid any sort of muscular hypertrophy work? I think that is a key thing for me. Learning and understanding the weight making process takes precedence over the training that you're wanting to put in. So the three biggest changes would be the use of Olympic lifting, transferring that into doing some loaded jumps and ballistic work instead. The second one would be the use of off-feet conditioning, even in our high intensity conditioning sessions. And then thirdly would be the importance of the weight making process and how that weight making process isn't in the final week, isn't in the final hours before weight cut, but should be considered even 12 weeks in advance. Okay, so this question is really detailed, but might be really helpful for those people that are looking to get stronger hips to try and increase rotational power. My style relies heavily on footwork patterns to create angles, but often find myself not being able to punch or too tired due to weak hips. How do you train the hips to be able to balance in those complex footworks whilst maintaining the possibility of punching back with proper rotational force? So this is a really good question. It's really specific for Q&A, but I think that a lot of people are going to take a lot from it. So this fighter, this athlete, is struggling with the hip strength to be able to get a certain combination of a very specific outcome. Now, this is something that we talk with our fighters quite a lot, struggling with something in terms of the technical demands. We'll talk to the fighter, we'll talk to the coaches, and we'll try and find some exercises that we can help supplement, whether it's rotating through the shots, whether it's a shoulder pain whilst doing a jab, whether it's something with the lower body, whether it's helping improving the footwork. Go with a very specific outcome, but we have to strip it back with some generic exercises and then transfer that into the specific exercises and then that specific outcome. So we're going to go through now with this situation here, looking at generic exercises, then we're going to look at some specific exercises. So starting off with the generic exercises, if somebody's got weaker hips, we would be looking at an assessment, whether that's an overhead squat or single leg squat assessment. Quite often in the single leg squat, what we're likely to see is the need to start drifting inwards and also a little bit of hiking of the hips. And this can suggest that an athlete is struggling with the oblique strength and also glute med strength. So the glute med is a muscle that's part of the gluteal complex that is just sitting at the side of the hips. And this is important for lateral stabilization and hip rotation. So it's really important for boxers to develop this. However, during general boxing training, it's not really overloaded. It's not really activated and isolated during traditional boxing training. So when they come into the Boxing Science Performance Center, quite often I'm like, right, yeah, glute med needs to be strengthened. So we can look at some general exercises to try and increase strength of the glute med, but also the glute max as well. Let's start with the glute max. So this is your primary hip extensor. Look to improve the strength of the glutes through hip dominant exercises. This can be a trap bar deadlift, but we can try and isolate that hinge a little bit further, doing Romanian deadlifts, kettlebell deadlifts, isometric hip thrusts, banded hip thrusts, also doing some single leg hip thrust variations, whether that's doing a hip thrust march or single leg hip thrust with the knee to chest. Then we look to do some glute med work. So we do this in every single warm up with our banded side clams and also banded lateral walks. But there's also some exercises that we can put in there. A split stance wall rotation, really good to really target the glute med. And then doing some lateral lunges, doing some offset reverse lunges. This is targeting the glute med whilst also strengthening that single leg in general, trying to kill two birds with one stone. We're getting the glute med strong, challenging the lateral stabilizers of the hip, whilst also developing strength of the quads, the hamstrings, and also the oblique muscles as well. So these are some key exercises that you can do from a generic point of view. And then let's work on the specific. We can do some banded shadow box where we're challenging the lateral stabilizers, glute med, to contribute to lateral movements. So with the banded shadow box, this is limiting that range in terms of lateral movement and also hip rotation. So we have that extra emphasis in terms of our coaching cues to make sure that athletes are fully extending, fully rotating the hips whilst being quite restricted with the bands. We can do many variations of this. We can do a general going up to a cone, doing a lateral pivot. This sounds like this is very similar to your style. A figure of 8 drill, where we're twisting, we're turning, we're pivoting. We're doing this for an extended period of time. And then we can start implementing the banded shadow box, but with an external resistance, using the bands around the hips. We can be doing it from the front, the back, and we can also be doing it from the side as well. Doing these banded drills are very specific. We can do this as part of a strength speed or speed strength phase, tapering in the strength and conditioning gym, or you can start implementing it part of your routine in terms of your boxing, doing it as part of your warm-up. I would suggest to do between 20 and 30 second repetitions, between 4 and 5 sets of this. Using the generic exercises and the specific ones will help with that specific outcome in improving your hip strength and endurance whilst pivoting and using your footwork to create them angles and to create rotational power during your punching. Next question, how many days per week do you do plyometrics? How many exercises per session or day or ratio between lower and upper body plyometrics. We use plyometrics more or less every single training session, which sounds quite excessive, but during the full training camp, we just change the emphasis in terms of the volume and the intensity of this. And also we change the type of plyometrics that we actually use. So for the lower body, we use it as a warm-up tool for conditioning, for boxing, but also using it as a key exercise during our strength and conditioning sessions. So first of all, for boxing, we'll use pogos, ladder drills, ice skaters to prime that lower body going into the boxing session. We do relatively low volume. We do 10 reps, 3 sets of each exercise, or on the ladders, we'll be doing 2 lengths, 3 sets. So very minimal loading, but enough to potentiate athletes going into their boxing drills. In terms of high intensity conditioning, we use it as a tool to prime the ankle joint to deal with the high impact forces during high speed running and high intensity conditioning. So we'll do short ground contact time work here, some sort of pogo variation, whether that's doing it rhythm pogos, banded pogos, bar assisted pogos, and we paired that with ladder drills or doing some sprint mechanic work, whether that's like some air drives into the wall or doing some air skip drills as well, and doing some running mechanic exercises. And then for strength and conditioning drills, we use it as an extended warm-up where we'll look to do the long ground contact time work, long stretch shortening cycle, where we're looking to increase that rate of force development from the quads, the hamstrings, and the glutes to really fire up that triple extension, the hips, knees, and ankles. We can do a range of different exercises here, whether it's a counter movement jump, loaded counter movement jump, depth jumps, the list goes on. And we do this before we start lifting. So we'll do 3 to 4 sets of 5 repetitions. We pair this with an ice skater or a single leg exercise, and then perform a punch specific exercise following that as well. In terms of upper body plyometrics, punch specific drills, whether that's doing the landmine punch throw or the medicine ball punch throw, the many variations that we put in. So in terms of like the ratio, I don't really see it as like a 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. It's like literally we do the extended warm-up every single time. We'll do lower body, ice skaters, and then we'll do the punch specific drills. In terms of using it as a key exercise, we'll only use the upper body plyometrics during speed strength phases, whether that is a landmine punch throw or med ball punch throw variation, or we'll do some chest pass work. So doing the banded med ball chest pass, really popular tool that we use at Boxing Science, or variation of the plyometric press up. Hopefully that's given you a good overview of what plyometrics that we use, when and how often. If you're wanting to find out more about plyometrics, boxing and combat sports, go and check out our free workshop, only limited time, free workshop on plyometrics for boxing and combat sports. We've had over 1,000 downloads of this already. Really appreciate your support and interest in this product, but it's only for limited time only. So if you're wanting to get your hands on this, which is a free ebook, a theoretical workshop, and also 2 practical workshops where you've got over 100 exercises, start implementing plyometrics into your strength and conditioning. So the link is in the description for that if you're wanting to find out more. Okay, so final question. How often should we get an athlete to do a red zone circuit? Week, a month, preparing for a fight? My concern is that the negative effects of red zone on the athletes if they overtrain. So I like to put in a circuit either once or twice a week. We use it in early stages of training camp when an athlete is a little bit heavier, maybe not being susceptible to doing some increased running loads, increased impact forces going through the lower body during the treadmill runs. So we like to supplement and use some red zone circuits there. And we use that as a main session, but also using it as part of your boxing training to supplement and to get like a conditioning finish in there. And you want to do that like once or twice a week. And doing this at the back end of a technical session, not when you've sparred, that's when we're spending like quite a lot of time in the red zone, but in a technical session where you might not have got them fitness adaptations out of the session. And this could be 3 or 4 sets and could just hit that red zone target for the session. With your concerns about like spending too much time in the red zone and potentially overtraining, it's important to take into account how long that you're spending in that red zone. So this is above 90% maximum heart rate. For each session, we suggest to optimize red zone adaptations to spend between 6 and 14 minutes in the red zone. And it's okay to do this once or twice per day. So it's okay to do it in your boxing sessions, and okay to do it in your high intensity conditioning. Let's say you're looking to do some red zone adaptations, part of your boxing. Let's say you've done a lower intensity technical session. You haven't quite hit that target. That's when you can put in a red zone conditioning circuit to finish. However, if you've already hit your red zone target and you've hit over 14 minutes in the red zone, maybe that's when you start pulling that finisher out of your session. Also, what's really important is when we're considering what kind of adaptation that we're targeting during our conditioning, when we're increasing the sparring loads. We've had athletes here that spar 6, 8, 10, maybe even 12 rounds, and they're spending between 20 and 30 minutes in the red zone. So with this, if we're doing another red zone session later on in the day or later on in the week, we are potentially going to be fatiguing our athlete a little bit too much there. So this is where we change the conditioning emphasis and the conditioning adaptation that we're going to target. This is why we start using our repeated sprint protocols, whether that's on the air bike or on the curve, whether we change the circuits from a red zone circuit into a power endurance circuit. This is where we're limiting the amount of work and we're increasing that recovery time. We're increasing that intensity to target muscle buffering adaptations, which are going to be crucial in helping you work at them, increase intensities, working in explosive bursts, whilst controlling that lactic acid accumulation. So if you're wanting to have a little bit more guidance on this, we've recently brought out our Circuit Conditioning for Combat Sports ebook. The full program has over 60 conditioning circuits that you can access at a click of a button. Go and check out the link in the description for more details. Okay guys, so that brings us to the end of the Boxing Science Podcast, episode 74. Thank you very much for watching and listening to our podcast. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button so don't miss out on any future content, and also support the growth of the channel. And if you are wanting your questions answered on the next Q&A session, look out for our post in the community tab where you can ask your questions about strength and conditioning, nutrition, business, coaching in general, or maybe some of the experiences that we've had at Boxing Science. Put in any question there and try and answer the best that I can on the next episode. Thank you very much for watching. See you on the next episode of the Boxing Science Podcast.